Have you ever wondered why some people seem to resist change, even when intellectually they know it's good for them? It's because change is a process. It occurs in stages, and they may be at a stage where growth is not yet possible. So, today we're talking about the exact stages of change that people go through when they do grow. So, if you are trying to help a loved one move through their own change process, you can have visibility into where they might be and also maybe understand your own growth process as well. In the last segment, we talked about how you can't change people. Even though people can change, change has to come from within them. But what exactly does that process of change look like? And how do you know where your loved one might be in that process? So here is what you need to know. When people make a significant change in their lives, they typically go through a series of stages that occur over time prior to their actually thinking, feeling, or behaving differently. And understanding these stages helps you explain and understand why change doesn't happen overnight, why it can't happen overnight, and also why it may feel like your loved one is stuck or even moving backwards sometimes. There are 5 stages of change that most people go through, and the first is called pre-contemplation. At this stage, a person doesn't even know that there is a problem. They may be in denial, or they may simply be unaware of how their behavior is affecting themselves or other people. If somebody is not aware that a problem exists, they can't and won't even think about taking action to change it. The next phase of this is something called contemplation. In the contemplation phase of growth, people are starting to recognize that something may need to change. Either they are experiencing some negative consequences or negative feedback, or they are having experiences where they're like, oh, maybe this is a problem. And so they are just beginning to think, to consider the possibility that they may need to do something differently, but they're still feeling ambivalent about it. You might hear things like, I know I should probably stop drinking, but it's not really that bad, making excuses for all kinds of things. But we'll also have some moments where they're like, yeah, I think I need to do something differently. This is all part of the growth process and what you can expect when people are kind of working through this state of being where they aren't changing, but the little seeds are starting to be planted. Now, the next phase of this is something called the preparation phase. So at this point, somebody has come to the conclusion of, yeah, I probably do need to do something differently. But they may be thinking about their options. Maybe they are listening to podcasts or videos like this one. Maybe they are researching online. How does this work? They may even be thinking about, if I did get some help, what kind of person might I be working with? They may be talking to friends or family members about their experiences with the change process. And here's where you have a really cool opportunity to help a loved one grow in this moment, especially if you are able to have courageous conversations with them that are helpful to them and that stimulate their own thinking, maybe sharing your own personal stories about your own growth and change process, but just remembering that these need to be really emotionally safe conversations. If communication has been challenging in your relationship, or if somebody may have a tendency to feel defensive in these moments, it's very important that you work on healthy communication skills before trying to broach this. Ideally, they're bringing it up with you if they feel emotionally safe with you, and if this is something that you would like to work on. I do have a free resource for you that I'd like to put in front of you. I put together a free, comprehensive two-part training, totally free. You can grab it at my website, growingself.com/communication. It is two fairly extensive video-based training sessions with me. It comes with a workbook that will walk you through a bunch of different activities. You'll get visibility into how communication is in your relationship currently, but also some actions that you can take that will improve communication and make it more likely that if your loved one does open up to you about their own growth process in this moment, that it will go well. So the other thing that you do need to be aware of in this moment is that in addition to people kind of thinking through options, this isn't where it stops, and that people might need to be in this preparation phase for a while before they're ready to move into the next phase, which is the action phase of change. And at this stage, this is the moment where they actually begin doing something. It might be calling a therapist like me to make that first appointment, or engaging in personal growth work. Perhaps they've started reading books or engaging in personal growth activities, working with a coach, but they have committed in their own minds and in their own hearts that they are ready to change, and they are taking real steps towards it. So attending therapy, groups, working through programs, or taking action to limit their engagement in unhealthy or unconstructive behaviors. But wait, there's more. After the action phase, there's actually something called the maintenance phase of change, which is, much less dramatic, but very important, because at this time, people have made significant changes, but this is still, you can't just stop thinking about it, because you have to still be engaged with your change process in order to maintain the gains that you have made and have a lot of self-awareness, because especially if we're trying to change long-term historical ways of being that we've had for a while, there's always going to be a pull to go back into the old habits, the old triggers, and the old ways of being. But here is something else that is really important to know and be aware of, which is people can get stuck in any stage, any one of these stages. And so if your loved one is resistant or isn't making progress, it may actually be that it isn't because they don't want to, but they have gotten stuck in one of these prior stages. Maybe they're still in pre-contemplation, and these aren't linear, okay? I mean, people can be in a place where they're like, what problem? And they can also come into a place of contemplation where they're like, okay, maybe I have a problem, but oscillate back and forth. And also, it's so important to remember that you cannot push them through this. You can't make anybody change. You can't do this work for them. And I know that that's so frustrating, but it is also the reality. And we also have to remember that we can only control ourselves, and that the way you handle yourself during somebody else's change process can actually have a huge impact. And I think there's a lot of value and understanding where people are in those stages of change, so that you can manage your expectations and that you can be the partner or the loved one that they need, which is having courageous and emotionally safe conversations, sharing your own stories, helping them gain a different perspective, right? It can be incredibly valuable, particularly if it is done in a constructive and emotionally safe way. But I hope this conversation was helpful for you. And I threw a couple free resources at you, but I have more. If you come to my website, growingself.com, come into the blog and podcast section. I have so many articles, podcast playlists that can help you work on yourself and improve your relationship. I also host a weekly live stream every Thursday at noon Mountain. I'm talking about you. And if you want to ask a question in advance, you can do that on my website, growingself.com/ Dear-Lisa. And don't forget to connect with me everywhere you watch and listen. Thanks for joining me, and I'll be back in touch with how to set boundaries as someone else is growing.